I think the general perception with every Metroid game is incredibly interesting as someone who became interested in the series so late to its inception. NES-Troid and Return of Samus are classics, and although they're antiquated decades from their release, there's a charm that they carry. Super Metroid, conversely, is incredibly acclaimed, widely considered one of the best games in its genre, and to some just outright. Fusion, on the other hand, seems underrated in the franchise, so I've heard a lot of good things about it, yet I've found no one who is as openly revering for it. That being said, I think these four get a lot of a better pass than Samus Returns and eventually Dread got. These are very divisive entries in the franchise from what I've gathered. Perhaps the former faces issue because it can be directly compared to AM2R, which is a game that I love as much if not more than Samus Returns. Equally though, there's a big difference in gameplay style between these, and Dread very much continues this. I've seen some people who are positive towards it, and I distinctly remember a few comments that weren't so congratulating. Still, I worked on these videos before Dread came out, and so thankfully, I've managed to get the video out just as the hype has peaked. Well, life got in the way a bit, but I want to cap off my far too delayed arc of covering every 2D Metroid today, and I'll equally see which one reigns supreme by the end. With that in mind, let's talk about Dread. So, as far as the story goes, it's a real doozy. Like, wow, I genuinely can, I don't want to talk about this, man. Like, come on, it's pretty okay. There's reports of an ex-parasite on a planet. Enemies were sent there. Some dude is there. I think he's, if I remember correctly, is he called Graham? You just got to get home. That's the story. You're welcome. What I find more interesting than the narrative are what I consider the centerpiece of Dread, the extraplanetary, multiform, mobile identifier, otherwise known as the E.M.M.Is. Maybe I'm overstating it, but these were my draw to the game. Like, they were the real standouts in the marketing from what I remember, with that trailer that ends on the shot of one killing Samus as it hard cuts to the logo. It's just so punchy and eerie. Or, in another sense, it filled me with dread. Now, every Metroid game has something I think it brings to the table or excels in unlike any other. NES-Troid was the trailblazer, yet it laid out adventure well. Return of Samus is uniquely lonely and had an atmosphere unlike its predecessor. Super didn't really bring anything new to the Metroid core, but it did add a lot of scope and polish to perfect the foundation. And Fusion really honed in on the horror elements of the franchise. So, where does Dread take us? Well, I think it has to be stealth, although it's not hugely ubiquitous to the game. More rather, while the core identity of Dread is an awesome game in my mind, its new element is contained in the new feature of the game, the E.M.M.I sections. These are an interesting subversion on the Metroid gameplay loop, whilst also a microcosm of Metroidvanias. But come on, you saw the title and thumbnail. I'm going to try and balance out my points because I don't want the overall message of the video to be stuck on that per se, but it's what my mind was left with after having beaten this game several times now. It's a fun game, but I do take umbrage with the most interesting part of Dread. So, why do I think the E.M.M.Is missed the mark? Issue number 1, enemy anticipation. This is purely a stylistic opinion and not a fundamental problem, but it's just in my personal preference that how the E.M.M.Is are handled make them feel a bit lackluster. Like how waiting for me to upload gets you feeling a little Luke-luster. Thank you everyone. Honestly, that joke took 3 years to pay off, baby. E.M.M.Is are in a dangerous environment, but it's also one that is almost perfectly in your control. You're never flung into an E.M.M.I door, you're just stonewalled at one if you need to progress through it. At times, this does feel scary. Dread has a really nice invisible hand when it comes to nudging you on the right path. The world structure is very much like 1 and 3, in that you kind of go around everywhere, but I rarely got lost as things just flowed so well in Dread. And when that progression takes you to an E.M.M.I door, there's an early sense of, oh, no matter the preparation you might take, this game gives you great times where the E.M.M.I catches wind of you and a game of cat and mouse occurs. It's honestly a brilliant anxiety-inducing interaction that really emphasizes the dread, because the game is called Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread. And yet, then there came a point. It was when it happened again, and then it happened again. And the constant repetition of it happening took what was once a feeling of disconcert into one of, oh, the door's here, okay. It doesn't really ever change it up, so once I got to the later E.M.M.Is, it really started to feel redundant. In contrast, I played Fusion again for this video just to make sure I remembered everything correctly, and how it approaches its main enemy in Sax, or SAX, or Sex, is different, but how I personally prefer. Sexy Sax is ubiquitous yet invisible, left to set pieces that brings emphasis on it and its power, as well as how powerless Samus feels. That lingering sense of not knowing when works really well for me, and admittedly I can see it being a bit boring if you want to interact with the main enemy more. It's just my style of horror. E.M.M.Is are cool at first, the nearer to the end it goes from dread to bed, as in night night, I'm really bored, hope you sleep well, make sure to have water by your bed in order to keep hydrated in the night, and always remember that I believe in you. Wait, is that a Metroid? Issue number 2 is the routine of it all. I kind of touched on it just earlier, but it goes further than just the anticipation in Dread. There's 7 E.M.M.I, or more like 5. You've got the regular one, the lemon flavoured one, the sad one, the UKIP one. They all have a certain quirk to them, but generally follow the same plan. Evade them from the first encounter, keep evading them as you pass through the rooms, eventually get what you need to find their brain, eliminate that, and wipe them out with a laser beam. Again, the first few times, it's cool, but they don't really do a whole lot different with this. I might be conflating getting stronger with it getting boring, but to an extent, they became much more chore-like than adversarial. In contrast, some enemies were both difficult to take out, yet had the satisfaction of defeating. There were a few mini-bosses which made me say things I can't repeat on this Christian channel, but I will not repent for them. To another extent, the boss battles were all pretty excellent, and I genuinely had such a fun time with all of them, I think. So instead, to have these formidable enemies in front of you, and the solution to defeating them being the same thing every time, just wore incredibly thin by the last one. Issue number 3 is the Phantom Cloak upgrade, and while this isn't so much a huge issue in and of itself, it definitely exacerbates the monotony of E.M.M.I sections. The Aeon gauge returns from Samus Returns, and I really like it. Flash shift is good for some doors and combat, the pulse radar works like the scanner and helps me because I am pretty dumb, and the cloak is also a neat ability to have too. Also, the game replenishes the gauge automatically, which is nicer than needing the orbs from combat. But the cloak just felt so overpowered in the game. You can hide from E.M.M.I bots with it being no real problem, and as that became the most reliable way to evade being found, it then just became commonplace. It slows the game down, and I guess it's pretty understandable to some extent. If you don't get caught, you get to go faster. But I just felt constantly like I was stopping and starting in these areas, and when I inevitably slipped up, because of course I am, look at me, going through it all again was just frustrating. This is almost in spite of the fact that the game is so slick and smooth to play. It's fantastic feeling with a Pro Controller and not a 3DS. Oh my god, I can't properly describe how much I want Samus Returns on something that isn't a brick. The slide function and counter-attack just adds fluidity to the traversal, and I'm such a fan of how it feels. I can definitely understand why this game was speedran pretty fresh from the game's release. However, to be continuously slowing the pace down in E.M.M.I sections made them feel more annoying than daunting. Issue number 4, the game over screen. Okay, this might seem like a bit of a weird one, but hear me out. Go back to the ad, with the climax of it being the sick use of the death animation. Samus gets caught, and then straight into the logo reveal. 10 out of 10, amazing way to showcase this. Then you die in the game, and what the fuck happened here? A quarter-second fade to black. Why was it done like this? Why did Nintendo add the default Premiere Pro transition into their game? They literally had the urgency of the death struggle to a T. You have a tiny window of escape and a huge chance to perish, firmly in that last struggle for your life. But fading out just kills what I thought could be a spooky end to an unsuccessful run in the game, and it really undersells the fact that she takes a spike to the face or the heart. Like, can you imagine if in Metal Gear Solid, when Snake dies, instead of the game going, oh, good one, Snake. No, but really, Snake, that shit is funny. No, seriously, Snake, no, you can stop fooling around now. Snake? Snake? Oop. Snake? Snake? Snakey Jakey? Snake. Yeah, so instead of that, imagine if it went like this. Like, I can't even believe that. Look, to be honest, I just thought of that bit and made a video around it. But I just think that the fade to black is a terrible way to cap off the fear and dread you should be feeling after dying. Metroid Dread. Is that petty? You're goddamn right it is. Shame that we had to fall out like this, Dread. Fallout New Vegas. And issue number 5, defeating the E.M.M.Is. I think it's really a shame how much conquering an E.M.M.I felt undersold by the way to get there. The cat and mouse chases, the last minute evasions, and progression outside the E.M.M.I rooms felt really good, albeit formulaic at times. Unfortunately, you never really get the catharsis that comes with defeating them, even when you defeat them. Not taking them out directly, but rather going to the mother brain room for each one is a cute callback to Metroid 1. It's also really lame. They're super easy to beat. Literally just a stopgap between running from and facing off against an E.M.M.I for the final time. Then it goes from chasing you to you just putting enough distance between yourself and the E.M.M.I to charge and attack and take them out. Other fights throughout Dread are pretty much the same as any other enemy in the Metroid franchise. They're stronger, they're harder, you might fail a few times, yet through trial and error, you eventually conquer and it feels great. The E.M.M.I section to me would be like if you were in Mario, Bowser was too strong, but it turns out if you run to the left and kill a blue Goomba. Oh, look at that, you get an AK. Is this what you wanted, Nintendo? Is this really what you wanted? Okay, I think I've got all my stupid bits out of my system. No, wait, hang on. Fallout New Vegas. I feel like a bit of a drag going so much into what I found issue with in Dread, and hopefully it seemed like it wasn't a huge amount of complaining and more just stupid shit I was saying, because I do genuinely really enjoy the game. But after all of that, where does it land on the 2D Metroid tier list? Well, I think it's finally time to finish off this long in the tooth video series. Metroid NES. It's actually a pretty good time once you've come to grips with it, and while I can't pretend it wasn't a struggle for me because I have a very smooth brain despite a rather large forehead, I think that once you get over the hurdles of knowing what to do, it's a fun adventure. Nonetheless, there's a lot of clunk that makes me appreciate it instead of go back and play it, especially thanks to the remake. C tier. Return of Samus is genuinely a bit of a dark horse for me as far as Metroid games go. It still has a lot of jank that comes from the game coming out so long ago, but I think I appreciate it more for what it's been able to do on the hardware it's on. To build as well as it did, despite those shortcomings, on the foundation that it had, deserves nothing less than a B tier. Now, Return of Samus improved the formula, but Super Metroid perfected it for sure. Honestly, I don't think I can add much more to the conversation about it. It's already so celebrated, but the gameplay is brilliant, it looks and sounds gorgeous, across the board, it's an amazing game, A tier. Fusion, however, might be where some controversy lies, because I think Fusion is better than Super. It's very apples and oranges in gameplay approaches and the overarching drive, but there's just something so eerily intriguing to me about the game. I think Sexy Saxy Sex Sax is the best villain in the games. The zone structure trims excess to create a core Metroid experience, and it feels so good to play. The platforming is so clean, and the increased horror just hits all the right notes for me. And playing it again only solidified this for me. S tier. Zero Mission is obviously the best way to play the original, bar none. It legitimately polishes every single facet of any Metroid. My only real gripe with the game was the length of it, as by Super and Fusion, I'd anticipated there might be more to do, but that wasn't really the case here. Still, it does a masterful rework of the original game's foundation, and I think in some cases the shortness of the game adds to its appeal. It's probably the best game to pick up if you're looking to get into the Metroid franchise as a complete beginner, and while I prefer some others, it still has to be A tier. Samus Returns may be a contentious choice for some, and I think it might be that there's just some love lost for a remake of a game that has a fan-made remake that Nintendo continuously stifled because f*** you for supporting a franchise that you love. Nonetheless, I really enjoyed my time with Samus Returns. It feels like a huge realization of the sequel, and with that comes so many vast improvements and inclusions, albeit at the drawback of it losing some of the original's luster. Another A tier. And finally, Dread. Despite my shortcomings with a pivotal part of the game, I think it excels on a lot of fronts. It feels so great to play. Honestly, I can't stress enough how much playing on 3DS sucked versus an actual controller. There's a lot of what I liked in Samus Returns here, like the counter system, strong enemies throughout, and the Aeon Gauge scanner really just works for me because after 7 games, I just have to admit, I suck at Metroid, okay? Every issues notwithstanding, I think a lot of interactions in combat are brilliant, and that's especially so with the boss fights. I fucking love that fire one, to be honest. Like, inject that in my veins, you know the one I'm talking about. Also, the final boss is great for constant trial and error too. Oh shit, yeah, the final boss. Spoilers, but hang on, I think this guy is Graham, yeah. I think this guy's your dad? And Samus says some stuff in the game that I'm not allowed to show on YouTube. But yeah, I think the story is pretty it's you know, nothing new. Also, I kind of undersold it, but I do think that this is the best map of any Metroid game. You just move around so much, but it rarely led to me getting lost. And I think that having so many areas you return to with something new to do is excellent. It feels so well thought out. Graphically and audibly, the game is brilliant too, but I think it really nailed this destitute planet vibe, and it was just a lot of fun to play. That being said, I do also think the E.M.M.Is are a notable drawback to the game. Add on to the fact the length of the game is kind of on the short side, and it's a bit of a buzzkill. I feel bad to dog on it like that, but I think I only mention it so much because this game was pretty high in my estimations. It just misses the mark on that front. Still, another strong A tier. And so yeah, it took me like 17 years too long to finish this, but I've finally touched on every 2D Metroid. As for the other games in the franchise, maybe closer to Prime's 4 release I'll look at them. But for now, I've got to admit guys, I'm pretty spent. Not just with Metroid, just in general. Yeah. But if you're someone who started following the channel in 2021, I'm so sorry this took so long. Yeah, you know what, that's how I'll end this. The videos are done on Metroid. I'm sorry. Goodbye everybody!